All right, let's talk about something that is really shaking things up. Apple's brand new MacBook Neo. Seriously, this is the one product that most of us thought Apple would absolutely never make. I mean, just think about that for a second. A brand new Apple laptop for $599. For years, that was just a fantasy. So, what on earth changed? And maybe more importantly, how did Apple actually pull this off? Okay, so to really get why the Neo is such a huge deal, we first have to look at the problem it was built to solve. It's this massive, gaping hole that's been in Apple's lineup for a very, very long time. You know the drill, right? For years, if you wanted an affordable Apple device for school or just for work, you had this impossible choice. You either had to shell out $1,000 or more for a real MacBook, or you'd try to get by with an iPad and a keyboard case. And let's be real, trying to write a term paper or juggle a bunch of spreadsheets on an iPad, it's just not the same. It's not a real laptop. And that brings us right to this, the MacBook Neo. This is the solution Apple finally came up with. So this is Apple's big answer. Look, it's not designed to be some powerhouse for video editors or coders. Its whole mission is actually much simpler, to be an amazing, super reliable laptop for all those everyday things and, crucially, to give people an easy way into the whole world of macOS. So, who's this really for? Well, Apple is being super clear about this. They're targeting students, people who mostly just browse the web and watch Netflix, and really anyone who needs a solid computer for emails, documents, and the basics. It is all about making a MacBook accessible. And then there's the price. $599. That number by itself is a game changer. But then you add the student discount and it drops to just $499. That puts this laptop in a category Apple has never competed in before. But okay, a price like that immediately makes you wonder, doesn't it? How on earth did they get the cost that low without completely gutting the experience we expect from Apple? Well, the answer is pretty fascinating. It all comes down to a handful of very specific and, I gotta say, very clever trade-offs that Apple decided to make. Let's just walk through them. First, they took out the keyboard backlight. It's a nice feature, sure, but not essential. They also made 8 gigs of RAM the standard, which is plenty for the people this is for. They also ditched the True Tone sensor for the screen. But the biggest move, the real genius here, was using a super powerful but less expensive iPhone chip instead of one of their custom M-series Mac chips. Now, before you think, an iPhone chip, that must be a huge downgrade, just hold on. The benchmarks are in, and this A18 Pro chip is actually more powerful than the M1 chip that was in MacBook Airs just a couple of years back. For everyday use, this thing is going to feel fast for the next 5 or 6 years. Easy. So what happens when you add all that up? Well, these changes are estimated to have saved Apple somewhere between $170 and $220 on the cost to build each and every unit. And that is how you get from a $1,000 laptop all the way down to $599. So you have to understand the MacBook Neo isn't just a new computer. It's a direct shot across the bow of the entire budget laptop industry. For what feels like forever, this space has just been dominated by 2 things, Chromebooks and cheap Windows machines. And now there's a third option, and it's a heavyweight. The MacBook Neo isn't just trying to compete here. It feels like it wants to completely redefine what a budget laptop can even be. And this is exactly why it's such a huge threat to them. At a very similar price point, you now get to choose. You can get one of the usual competitors, often made of plastic with a shorter lifespan, or you can get a device with that signature Apple premium build quality, the slick macOS software, and a reputation for being incredibly reliable. This whole thing really signals a massive shift in Apple's business strategy. It seems like they're now prioritizing getting a high volume of new users over making a high profit on every single device. This strategy here is pretty straightforward. You know, traditionally, with something like the MacBook Air, Apple aims to make a really healthy profit margin on every sale. With the Neo, the margin on each laptop is definitely lower, but the goal is just to sell a ton of them, making up for it with sheer volume. And that really pulls back the curtain on the long-term play here. Selling a MacBook Neo isn't just about selling one laptop. No, it's about bringing a brand new person into the Apple ecosystem, someone who, down the line, might buy an iPhone, then an Apple Watch, and subscribe to a bunch of Apple's services for years and years. Think about it. For the past decade, we've heard so much about how tablets could replace laptops. But the Neo is so good and so affordable that it might actually reverse that whole trend. And that's what's behind this idea, that we're about to see the grand return of the classic laptop as the main computer for most people. So we end with this final thought. Now that Apple is offering this much quality and performance at this price, the pressure is officially on everyone else. Are the makers of Chromebooks and Windows laptops going to be forced to seriously step up their game? The MacBook Neo might not just change Apple's lineup, it might end up lifting the quality of the entire market.